Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning on this informational webinar for CESMII's RFP3, Request for Proposal number 3. My name is Harish Malkani. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for CESMII, and I'm joined by several colleagues of mine from the Institute who will be participating and sharing this information with you today. The agenda looks like this. I will first provide a brief overview of what RFP3 is, and we are very excited to have this issued for the Institute, and looking forward to some great input from those that are going to be submitting their proposals. We have a bit of a switch in the order today due to some conflicts. We will begin with focus area number 2, which is to do with education and workforce development. Conrad Leva will be presenting that, followed by enabling R&D. I will cover that. Jonathan Weiss will then cover the focus area on platform capability. And then myself as well as Jonathan will jointly cover the SM innovation projects, which is the focus area 4. Howard will then provide a short tutorial on what cost share is for those of you who are not familiar with how these funding contracts work. And then finally, Miguel will cover some of the finer details of what the RFP process looks like going forward. And we will hold a Q&A towards the end. There is a Q&A box on your Zoom window. Please feel free to start entering your questions there during the presentation, or you can also wait till the end, whatever you prefer. The webinar will be recorded and posted, as Roy said. So thank you, Roy, for taking care of that. All right. So RFP3 is it's a third RFP for the Institute, and I just wanted to provide a perspective on how these things get launched. So the Institute has a roadmap that has been published ever since the Institute was formed. And we updated that roadmap in December of 2020. And the roadmap has 4 major pillars that represent the ecosystem integration, enabling technologies, the smart manufacturing innovation platform, and smart manufacturing education. And what we do in the roadmap is for each of these areas, we define specific focus areas and deliverables that are relevant for that particular pillar. And these are just screenshots of portions of the roadmap that deal with those particular focus areas. Our entire roadmap is very closely aligned with our Institute goals on things like energy efficiency, deployment, and reduction in cost and time to deploy SM systems. We want to democratize smart manufacturing, so significant industry adoption of these technologies is one of our goals, and then improvement in energy productivity for the nation. And what you'll see is that in each of the focus areas that we're going to present today, you will see the connections back into our roadmap as well as our Institute metrics. Now, this happens to be RFP number 3. We've previously issued 2 other ones. So RFP1 was issued in 2017. A lot of those projects are coming to conclusion this year. There was about $16 million worth of investment then. We had RFP2 that was launched in 2019 and 2020. That was about $12 million. And again, this covered all 4 pillars that I mentioned earlier on. And the same thing here, we are covering a lot of ground in a much smaller RFP, but we are actually doing more of a surgical strike, meaning that we've identified areas that are very specific that have not been addressed in the past. And we will be talking about those for this particular RFP. So roughly about $5 million for this. Already covered that. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention here is that the 4 different areas, focus areas that we have in the RFP are extremely strongly connected to each other. When you look at a manufacturing use case that you're trying to solve, you not only need the technology pieces, but you also need the workforce development pieces. Otherwise, it's not considered to be successful. And these use cases may vary from discrete to hybrid to continuous operations. They may be related to small, medium, or large companies, manufacturing companies as well. So these areas here are related to technology, and what I've done here is marked the ones that are related to this particular RFP. So the focus area within the RFP is marked here. This is around the enabling technologies. So we talk about sensing, control, analytics, modeling, those types of things, and specific gaps that we need to fill there. The platform and profiles is the second area here. Profiles are information models that we are developing in a fashion that become reusable. And the platform is a way for us to implement those technologies and demonstrate how that can be done. And then finally, a marketplace that's full of smart applications, software applications that provide the functionality for a smart manufacturing solution, including some of the smart manufacturing profiles that we'll talk about. So that's on the technology side. And then on the workforce development side, it's all about development of the content, development of training tools, and then some way to share the knowledge, either through the training programs or even as a portal. And these are elements that we'll talk about in the workforce development piece of the RFP. So the 4 focus areas for this RFP, enabling R&D projects, these are basically what we've done is we've taken a look at what are the building blocks for smart manufacturing solutions and what has not been addressed in the past RFPs. And this could deal with all of the building blocks like sensing, control, analytics, and so on, but more importantly, how you can demonstrate the integration of these technologies for specific use cases. So that's going to be the focus on this one. Workforce development are focused on education and training content development, and this could be content that is meant for different types of persona, right? So you could have the pipeline in the universities. You could also have content that is being developed for those that are already in the workforce. And then the tools for training and the knowledge repository so that you can actually access the information and train the talent pipeline as well as the workforce. The SM Innovation Platform capability projects are meant to enhance what our Smart Manufacturing Innovation Platform does today with additional capability. And this could include pieces that are dealing with connectivity, information contextualization, instance management, instance as being instances of the platform, and then integration of solutions within the platform. And finally, the SM innovation projects, these are projects that have sort of 3 legs in them. The first one is that it solves a manufacturing use case, a specific manufacturing use case that is identified by a manufacturer. But at the same time, it also contributes to the platform in 2 different ways. One is either the use of the platform itself in creating that solution and or creating structured information models for that particular asset or that particular process. Then it becomes available in the SM marketplace for use by others. So these are at a high level, the 4 different focus areas. And in terms of the RFP itself, those 4 focus areas that I talked about are listed here on top. And each of them has a slightly different flavor on the period of performance. So you can see the enabling R&D are slightly longer term, 12 months, whereas the innovation projects are shorter, 6 months. The total amount of funding that's allocated for each of these blocks, the rough number of projects we are expecting in each of these, and then the maximum federal funding that's provided here. Now, all of these projects have a 50% cost share, meaning that the federal portion is 50% of the project cost. The other 50% comes from in-kind contributions from our members, and we'll talk about that as well a little bit later. All of the proposals are due August 10th, and we expect to launch the projects in February of 2022. The details obviously are listed here. You've probably already seen the RFP document. So. Okay, so with that, we're going to switch the order a little bit. I'm going to go to Conrad if he can give us a little bit of a deeper dive on the education and workforce development pieces of this RFP. Conrad, floor is yours.
Thank you. Go ahead and move to my first slide. And Thanks and hello. I'm excited about this wave of education projects. Here on the screen, we are showing an ambitious education plan for CESMII on smart manufacturing that covers the many areas of technologies and strategies that are all related to smart manufacturing. And CESMII depends on the member ecosystem to develop and deliver this range of education. We have several projects in progress working towards engineering programs, but this RFP wave is focused on specific smart manufacturing skills and workforce. Please advance to highlight the areas for this RFP. So we are focused here on the workforce audience, and I'll cover that in more detail in a very surgical, like Harish said, strike on filling some of the gaps in skills in the manufacturing workforce. So let's advance and let's take a look at the curriculum guidance. So for this project wave on the workforce, these are the roles that we're trying to upskill in the workforce and the type of skills that we want to provide. So we're looking for projects that are going to help us build this curriculum and the course content, and also tools to help us deliver this kind of education, all the way from data capture to visualization to analysis, modeling, optimization, problem solving, and not only within the factory, but you'll also see that we want to talk about the factory as a node in the supply chain. And from the skills point of view, yes, we have the engineer up there for completeness, but we really want to focus on these other roles. So for each one of these skills, we might have 1, 2, 3 levels of depth, depending on the need of the specific role we're trying to upskill. Next. We have 3 specific project areas we're looking for proposals. The first one is the curriculum itself, and we want that to be focused on a workforce upskilling program that is very flexible and that people could take courses as they work. So provide that flexibility for employers to send employees to take courses while they're working. And also, I mean, this could even be an alternative to currently for manufacturing careers, you need to have a 4 or 6 year programs to even get started with some of the skills we're talking about. But we know that there's a need for some alternate paths that we can, through micro-credentialing, badging, start acquiring some of those skills, maybe even right out of high school, and then move on to a pathway to a 4-year program. So those are some of the considerations we want. We want not only the content, but we also want hands-on educational modules. So this shouldn't be just theory, but we want hands-on educational exercises and modules that are leveraging some of the tools that we're going to talk about also. The second wave of projects, or the second type of project we're talking about, is that we want virtual reality or digital twin based learning system. And that is for those hands-on exercises and some of those classes, we want digital twin versions of industrial assets that can provide data to some of these exercises for students. We have great partners in the ecosystem right now that have real industrial assets, but there's only so many students that can access those assets at a time, because a lot of the curriculum is being deployed at the same time on a quarterly basis, and you hit, there's only so much students that can hit it in parallel. But through the use of a virtual reality system and digital twin systems that simulate that asset, we can provide access to more students that to educate them in parallel. So that's the idea, the general idea with these systems, that they will emulate the real data, that it could be a combination of video from real assets, some light 3D models, but the most important thing is the ability to stream data that emulates problems that for those student exercises, problems that should be related to the type of curriculum that we presented. So when we look at these software systems to help education, the education we're talking about is the curriculum that we had up. The third type of project is an educational smart manufacturing app. And that means not only here's Power BI, go for it. I mean, we're really talking about having a package exercise with software that students could download, either to provide a tablet or their own tablet or smartphone, and have hands-on experience with the type of software tools that they would use in industry. There's been a complaint from industry that some of the tools that students are getting equipped with are not the type of tools that they use in the factory. So we really want tools representative of the type of user interfaces of applications they're going to use in their future jobs. And we want those to be packaged with data for exercises, for those classroom, ability to reset that data for a new batch of students, and package that in a way that we can provide it to educational institutions. So that's all part of the scope of this project. We're encouraging software vendors to work with manufacturers and educators in our ecosystem. So it doesn't need to be just one or the other. Applying in the proposal, you can team up for the proposal that would actually be look favorably. And these projects should also include guides for the instructors and suggested student exercises. So that's on the educational side. Haresh, back to you.
Thank you very much, Conrad. Appreciate it. All right, we'll go back to our regularly scheduled program. We'll begin with focus area 1. I'll just spend a few minutes covering this. This was all about the enabling R&D portion of the RFP. Just wanted to set the stage here in terms of what these building blocks are and how they're connected. So I'd like to use this diagram to articulate that. When you talk about a manufacturing process, whether it's a unit step in the manufacturing or whether it's a linked manufacturing process, you begin by collecting the data through the sensors. You then use the power of platforms to actually do the contextualization of the data so that it becomes more actionable information in the process. And once you are at this stage, that is when you have the building blocks for things like analytics and modeling and control come into play so that you can actually take the appropriate action. What we're trying to do here is to, in the enabling R&D segment of this RFP, is to take this particular diagram and say, are there solutions that are integrated in nature where you can demonstrate this for some exemplar manufacturing processes, where you can say that you have a tremendous opportunity for energy productivity, a tremendous opportunity for improvement in productivity or quality, and do so in a sense where you can demonstrate the integration of these technologies. So that's the focus of one of the focuses of that enabling R&D segment of this RFP. So specifically, there are 3 areas in which we would like to get proposals on. One is, as I said, integration of these building blocks, but we're looking for one particular or 2 different use cases, one for the process industry and one for the discrete manufacturing industry. So anything that demonstrates the integration of these building blocks and have an impact on energy and productivity for these types of use cases would be welcome in terms of a project proposal. The second one is particularly focused on multi-step feed-forward control and optimization. So think about not a unit step, but think about a production flow path where you have multiple steps before your product actually gets made to be sold. And the idea here is to come up with use cases and demonstrations or development of technologies that can help that problem to be solved in a multi-step production flow path. One of the things that's lacking in today's implementations is how does a downstream process react to something that has happened in an upstream process through the use of smart manufacturing solutions. So we would love to see some of those demonstrated here. And the last one is very, very specific, and this is to enable our small and medium manufacturers who have a lot of legacy equipment in their plants and develop some cost-effective solutions for them for sensing purposes. And one of the technologies that we're looking at is 5G. Everybody talks about 5G, but let's bring that home for a manufacturing use case that is suited for small and medium manufacturing with legacy equipment. So any proposal that fits that particular theme would be very welcome in this case. So that's more or less the enabling R&D portion of this RFP. We'll move on to focus area 3. Jonathan, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks. Well, I'm also excited about this RFP wave. There's a lot in there and a lot of different ways to engage on technology. On the platform focus area, I thought I'd start with kind of a brief overview for those who are new to this of what the platform is, and then talk in a little bit more detail about the types of projects that we're looking for here. So this is a kind of overview picture of the platform, but just to zoom out a little bit before we dive in, the platform is really two things. As an institute, we are working with standards bodies and standards organizations, both here in the US and around the world, on some best practices or kind of an ideal implementation that stitches together some of the ideas that are out there for solving some of the information problems that we have in manufacturing. So the first incarnation of the platform really is as a reference platform. It's a place where we kind of enact these ideas and test them out. And the main output of that is our contribution to the open standards and open specifications that we think everyone in this space should be adopting. The second incarnation of the platform, though, is an actual working version, not just a reference or a mechanism for contributing to documents, but it's actual member software where we have contributing CESMII members who make commercial software and are aligned with this vision of standardizing and, in a sense, commoditizing some of the bottom parts of the stack to make it really simple to get to the value creation at the top of the stack. So this is real working software that's actually adopting these open standards and open specifications. And those CESMII members have made their software available to other CESMII members for their projects for free. So we want to continue kind of pushing forward both, but the actual kind of working arm of this strategy is a real working platform. We've got over a dozen instances of it running now in real world manufacturing scenarios. And we're using those exercises to kind of identify gaps or places where we can improve together and then move them over to the other side of the fence as contributions to open standards and open specifications. So if that's kind of the dual strategy for the platform, we'll focus on the actual running version of it now, kind of understanding the relationship back and forth between those two incarnations of it, and look at this diagram as kind of separating the platform, our ideal platform, into 4 parts with 3 edges, if you will, in between them, or 3 points where there's an interface between the layers. At the bottom, we have manufacturing technology, sometimes called OT or operational technology. And there's a wide variety of pieces of equipment. There's a wide variety of protocols. In the US, much of the equipment is what we call brownfield. It's been there for a while, but there's also brand new kind of IoT gear coming out. And so we need to be able to talk to all of it, regardless of whether it supports a proprietary protocol or an open protocol. So the first layer there of our platform, we call the edge, or we'll be more specific in the future. This is the edge gateway. There's a multi-part strategy for edge as well. But for the sake of brevity today, we'll just talk about the gateway, whose job it is to move data from these potentially proprietary devices or systems up into a standard so that we can work against it. So that's that edge layer, and it's focused on adaptation, on connecting to what exists, and if necessary, modernizing it along the way. The core platform then is that middle layer, and that's where we at least temporarily store the data. The platform isn't attempting to be a historian or a database, but we do need to have the data stored so that we can kind of exercise our primary goal here, which is bringing structure to that data. So those different data sources may or may not have good data structures in them. By the time that we get to this middle layer, we need to store data as objects. Those objects need to be of common types, and those objects need to have relationships with each other that needs to be stored in a graph fashion. It's not a purely hierarchical relationship. There's all sorts of kind of intermingled relationship types within that graph. There's the possibility to also store data elsewhere, and that's an exploration that's maybe out of scope for today. But suffice it to say, this is sort of the middleware layer where we broker access to well-structured contextual data. That access then is intended to be given to apps. And an app is, in this sense of the word, external code that depends not on a particular piece of equipment or not on a particular protocol. It instead depends on an information interface that is served by the platform, whether that's our platform, another implementation of the reference platform. Apps take dependency on information structures rather than on particular equipment or particular protocols. So you'll see that, as Haresh has been kind of helpfully pointing at the slides, that as we move up, there's a piece of glue that connects each of these layers. And we call that the smart manufacturing profile. The smart manufacturing profile is not entirely our invention. In fact, we're very much drafting behind efforts from the OPC Foundation, from the Industry 4.0 team in Europe to kind of take all the ideas for defining information models in a standard way and making that the foundation of the SM profile. We have a few goals beyond that, just before you move on, Haresh. So part one is the information model, or in programming terms, the class definition. Part two is intended to automate or at least facilitate binding to those lower level protocols. So part one exists in the middle, part two exists in the bottom, and then part three we're taking advantage of now, which is the application interface. The API that we're proposing, this open API, is object and type based, and it is informed by the SM profile. So now you can move on to the next slide, and maybe just we'll spend a minute on what is an SM profile. And maybe the easiest way to kind of visualize it is as against a piece of equipment. Could also be against a process or something even more abstract, but let's keep it nice and concrete and look at the data model of a hydraulic press. So we spent some time kind of brainstorming and looking at the data that is in a hydraulic press, and we even went a step further and maybe organized some of it. But generally, this list of data, when it comes out of the OT system, is a flat list of key value pairs. And we take samples of each value for each key, and we store that as a time series sample. And it's very helpful for drawing trends. It's not helpful, though, for repeatable software development. If the attribute name changes as I move from one vendor's piece of equipment to another, even if those are like pieces of equipment, if the labels in the data model or the available data is different between OEMs, or it's the same machine, but it's been implemented on a different vendor's PLC, the underlying thing, although logically similar, is apparently very different. So like in existing systems that have existed in the past, our first goal is to bring a common semantic, a common structure that we can apply across all like machines, and move away from just a list of key value pairs that is specific to equipment or protocol into a class definition that could be more broadly applied. And if you're tracking with me, the next logical question is, how can you broadly apply a class definition across things that are only logically similar, not apparently similar? So on the next slide, we will briefly explore some of the computer science principles that we're trying to bring to operational technology. And if you've done any object-oriented development, none of these are foreign to you, but I'll just briefly touch on some of the ways that we tackle this problem in IT kind of software development. So the first pattern coming along my left here is a simple inheritance pattern, where we start by looking at a stamping press at its most general. What are the laws of physics that apply to stamping something? And so at this point, we don't know anything about who made the stamping press or the unique characteristics of a particular stamping press. We're looking at the characteristics of stamping in general, and looking at what's always true, because we all live on planet Earth and obey the same laws of physics. And so that in itself is a profile. That's a standalone profile, and it's a fairly abstract profile. You couldn't directly apply it to manufacturing, but it's a common starting place where everyone who is doing stamping can derive from. So then we'd move to the next level of specificity, and we would look at mechanical pressing, and we would define only the characteristics that are unique to mechanical pressing. We would inherit everything from the common kind of laws of physics profile. So now we have two profiles, but one inherits from the other. And we can continue moving down in specificity until we have a profile that has some unique characteristics because it's from a particular vendor in a particular operation at a particular manufacturer. But at this point, we're defining only what's unique about that scenario. We've inherited everything else from the parent profiles. And there are other types of relationships from which we can derive the specific class definition. One is composition. So motors always obey the same laws of physics, and motors are typically used in the press. So at some point, our specific profile aggregates other component profiles. And then at CESMII, we're particularly interested in interface profiles, or what is common data that is common independent of the type of operation. And one of the things that we're interested in is understanding energy consumption. So you can implement an energy interface as part of a profile, and you inherit from that as well. You don't have to come up with the information model. You can use one that we've agreed on across the US and potentially even globally, so that we have common information. And then apps build on those profiles rather than on specific objects or specific protocols. Anywhere that the iEnergy profile has been implemented, an energy app could potentially work. So we're very interested in developing both these specific profiles, but also the general and the component profiles that can be used as building blocks to make up profiles for specific things. So moving on to the areas of interest, we are looking for expertise in developing formal ontological models, kind of those high-level profiles that could be commonly applied. We're looking for base profiles where we're not taking in expertise about a particular manufacturer's application, but we are defining what is the language and what is the base profile we would use for this problem space. And we know that we probably don't have to invent these. They're probably out there. And so the exercise may be bringing this outside expertise into the profile definition format so that it can be reused and distributed through the SM marketplace. This is a bit of an aside, but one of the things that we've noticed is we have these dozen or so instances of the platform, and they're all working well. They're doing what we hoped they would for the particular problem. But as we look kind of across the US, a manufacturer is not a silo. Manufacturers are part of other manufacturers' supply chains. And so there's a need to share or broker data between platform instances. So we have an area of interest exploring those approaches where we're not looking to reinvent the platform or the reference that we have, but maybe establish a new reference for platform to platform instance communication. We're looking at targeted profile creation. So if you or if your company works with equipment, if you've looked a lot across your customers or constituents, and you know a piece of equipment well or a type of equipment well, yours is the expertise that we would like to bottle and make reusable for the industry. And there's a monetization potential for that, but we'd like you first to think about how can we avoid repeating the same work over and over again every time we encounter this piece of equipment, and truly establish a de facto standard for the information model for that equipment. And then finally, where a standard information model exists or potentially could exist, can we bottle the value creation on top of that? Can we develop a predictive analytic that uses that information model and helps people make better decisions against those equipment or processes? So those are the four areas that we're interested in for the platform capability. The platform is stable and running well now. And what we really want to do is expand the library of reusable components that CESMII members and the industry can benefit from.
Outstanding. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so we move on to focus area 4. This is the SM innovation projects. And I'll just provide you with some background on what these projects are looking like. So when we talk about a sort of an ecosystem that works on these projects, then we might have a systems integrator, a manufacturer, a software application vendor, academia perhaps, or even a machine builder, or any combination of these. But the key thing here is that we would like a manufacturer to be playing a fairly critical role in this project. And by defining the target asset or a process based on a particular problem or a need for that manufacturer. That's where it all begins. And then the team comes together and does three things, right? It creates the solution for that problem. It creates an SM profile for that asset or the process, and it either uses or creates predictive models that become part of that application. So those are the three things that are done in the project, and really the demonstration of the use of the platform, if that's applicable, but more importantly, the contribution back to the platform through some of these profiles and applications, and at the same time solving the manufacturer's problem. Now, the target is to have these projects run in a fairly rapid manner. So the amount of funding that's available is smaller in relation to some of the other projects. And we are expecting this to be roughly about 6 months in duration. So what we've done for these projects is we've defined three areas, or three large buckets. One deals with use cases that are specific to things like energy efficiency and energy productivity and the improvement thereof. The second bucket is around performance and productivity of that asset or that process. And the third one is around process monitoring and performance prediction, including things like predictive maintenance and so on. So these three broad classes of projects is what we're looking for. But there's a caveat, a couple of caveats. One is that as we are working on these use cases, we are asking you to generate the information models or the profiles for that particular use case, as well as create the connections with the applications and make those applications and information models available for our marketplace, so that others can actually create solutions based on those components. One of the things that I would like to highlight here is that we've had 2 rounds of these projects already, and there are a tremendous number of use cases that we've been able to address through that. So there are roughly about 14 different projects that we've got in flight right now. What we would like to do is to make sure that the project proposals for this round addresses use cases that are not covered in the portfolio yet. And I've just thrown a few examples out. It doesn't mean that they have to be the ones that you have to propose, but just look through the list on the website and make sure that you pick something that we don't have already. And stamping, forming, extrusion, forging are just some examples that that I've been able to come up with, but there's certainly more than that. The second piece is that if there is an industry vertical that we have not covered, we would love to see some of the examples there. For example, in automotives and metal manufacturing, to just state a couple of them, and there might be more. So I would encourage you to look at the list of projects and say, hey, you have not covered this particular industry. We have expertise. We can come back and make a proposal. And the third one is that we would really love to have focus on small manufacturers. So if your proposal has a small manufacturer as part of the team, that would be absolutely fantastic for us. Any underrepresented industries or underserved regions as well. So that we would love to see some of the diversity in those types of use cases. So anything to add, Jonathan?
I think you got it.
All right. Okay, so that was SM Innovation Projects. And we'd like to move over to describing a little bit more about the RFP process itself and some of the details in terms of how you can look at the application process and what that selection process and notification process looks like. So with that, Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Haresh. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so today, what I'd like to do is I'm going to cover 4 different areas about this actual RFP. One would be to give you an expectations of what we are hoping to see on a good proposal. That'll give you some idea of how to prepare your proposals and where to concentrate and the type of information that we're looking for. I will also cover the selection criteria, so we have an idea how we go about selecting and evaluating proposals and coming with the final selection list. I will also talk about the process, so you'll see where we are in this whole RFP and until we get to the execution phase. And finally, we'll dig a little bit into the actual submissions, the templates, the proposals that we're going to be giving you and will be available for you. So let me start with the expectations. So the expectations, this is just to help you make your proposal if you're interested in responding to our RFP. A little bit stronger. And, you see, we have listed here some of the typical questions that we ask ourselves internally when we see the different proposals. For example, what's the problem statement? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to solve? What is the problem? So that's very important to capture in a very concise, succinct manner. So when we see it, we don't have to go through multiple sections in your proposal to know what the problem statement is. So that has to be very clear right up front, right at the beginning. We want to see exactly what is the problem that you're trying to solve with your solution that you're proposing. And then the objectives have to be clear as well. If you are solving a specific problem, list the outcomes, what will be delivered at the end, be very clear, you will be receiving A, B, C, and D. This is how it works, so all of that has to make sense, very simple to anybody reading your proposal. The way you're going to solve it is also important, the technical approach. List the specific steps in there that will help us know exactly how you're going to approach this problem and how you are going to solve it. And then we're also looking at the benefits, what would be the impact? And here what we're talking about is really the impact on the industry itself, as a whole, the benefits is specifically to the institute as well as the different partners. So the more information you give us here and the more direct you are in listing those benefits, it's a lot better for us as well. And it's easier for us to evaluate the proposals that way. Then there'll be no questions. As far as the deliverables, I mentioned at the beginning that it's important to list those deliverables. We're going to be asking you to list your tasks and how you're going to go about solving the problem. So it's important for us to know that you have a real good plan in solving this problem, and that you have identified the different tasks that you will follow as the project progresses. Those tasks and milestones that we're asking, they have to be SMART, and I think everybody understands the SMART concept. They got to be specific, measurable, obtainable, so all time bound and relevant. So it's important that you follow that. So when you list a task, we say, for example, very quickly, I can grab an example and say, I will develop a piece of equipment. Well, that's not very smart. You have to tell us, exactly what you're developing, when you're developing, is it going to take 1 month? Is it going to take 2 months? Is it relevant to the overall objective of the project? And we're not asking here for a big summary, which is a very short sentence, but it has to capture those elements. And then the budget, at this point, when you submit your proposal, we're not asking for a very detailed budget and the cost of the project. We just want to see your breakdown on the labor, material, software, and travel. So that will give us an idea, how much the project is going to invest in the different areas that we're asking here. And then finally, we also want to see your team members, who's part of your team. Do you have the right experts in your team to tackle the problem that you mentioned, in your proposal? So it's important for us to also know that you have a strong team, that you have different representations from the different industries, if it's relevant. If you're solving a problem for the automotive industry, do you have experts in that domain, in that area of expertise, in that industry? So all of that is important for us to, at the end, you do a good evaluation and be fair to everyone. So I hope this gives you an idea what the expectations. You'll keep this in mind as you're preparing your proposal. And then, with that, let me just give you some idea of how we go about selecting and evaluating the proposals. So we basically use 3 different areas when we evaluate your proposal. Our criteria includes the general, what we call general criteria, which involves several aspects as well. We do a technical evaluation and then a portfolio selection. So the general criteria covers very general areas like, what's the business impact? Okay. Now, you might want to include this in your proposal as well and give us an idea. For example, if you're tackling a problem that will reduce energy, increase productivity, or will create cost savings, we want to know if you have an idea what the percentage improvement is, and put some numbers in there, because sometimes we see proposals that said, yeah, this project will improve energy reduction, it will improve productivity, but there's no tangible or at least an idea what the targets are. So it is important for us to know that from the business perspective. The technical significance is also important. Are we going to be able to reuse the technologies that you are developing, or anything else that you are developing as part of the proposal? And are those technologies will be available for the other industries or other sectors? Also, the project execution. We take a look at your project objectives, your scopes, your deliverables. Have those been well articulated and defined, so anybody can understand exactly what this project is about? So that's the general criteria, okay? And we do that with not only with CESMII people, but we invite other people to also help us with that. The technical evaluation, again, it's really just getting into the technical aspects of your project. We look at your technical merit. Is the proposal aligned with the areas of interest of the RFP? In this particular case, we have 4 focus areas. So if you are responding to one specific focus area, we want to make sure that you are addressing those areas of interest. You might have a great project and you might have a great proposal, but if you're not addressing the RFP itself and the details, then it becomes a weak project or a weak proposal. Then the technical approach, as I mentioned at the beginning, is really important, how you are going to solve the problem. Okay, and we look for the specifics here. We want to see exactly, how you're proposing to solve this problem. We want to see the entire picture of the project and how you're going to go about solving it. And every one of these components has a specific percentage that we assign to it. For example, the technical and management capability, which is your representations with the different partners. Haresh mentioned the intention of having underrepresented industries maybe, or small manufacturers involved. All of that is part of this technical and management capability aspect that we evaluate as well. And this portion here gets evaluated by external evaluators, which help us concentrate on the technical aspects of the project. And then finally, we have the portfolio selection. And the portfolio selection it's important because here is where we as an institute look at what we have in our existing portfolio. Haresh mentioned at the beginning that we are encouraging to look at what we have so far, the industries what we have tackled, the use cases that we have, the projects that we're running, the projects that are coming to a completion right now, and make sure that your proposal doesn't overlap too much with those. Because if you are giving us another example of what we already have, obviously, we're going to look at that. But if there is another proposal that is tackling something completely different that will benefit the industry and the institute, then that one will have obviously a greater ranking. Your strategic goals of the institute are also important. We want to make sure that we're meeting those strategic goals through the development of these proposals and these projects, that we have, as I mentioned before, solutions that will not only be good for one specific industry, although that could be the case. If we have a solution that only applies to one industry but is bringing a lot of savings and is creating a huge impact in that particular sector, obviously that is a great proposal and will be evaluated that way. But if it's cross over other industries and the applicability, then it makes it even stronger. So keep these things in mind as you develop your proposal and as you continue putting together your teams and your proposal for the different focus areas. Now, let me give you a quick overview of the process that we follow here at CESMII. Most of you are probably familiar. We issue the RFP. Actually, before we even do that, there's a lot of effort going on at the Institute with the DOE in defining the areas of interest. And then once that gets finalized, then we issue the RFP. And that's where we are right now. We do these webinars to help you understand what we put on the RFP. But most importantly is once the RFP is issued, then we wait for your proposal. And right now you're going to have between 6 to 8 weeks to prepare a proposal. Okay. Once we start receiving the proposal, there's a lot of work that goes inside CESMII to evaluate those, to make sure that we have good representations in the different focus areas. And that takes about three weeks or so. Then once those proposals are evaluated, we rank them, we go through the criteria that we have, we create a list of proposals that would be accepted. They get submitted to the DOE for final review, and we do a concurrence with them. So the DOE will validate our selection. And then once those proposals are selected, we will be contacting the individual lead organizations, telling them that they have been selected, and we move on to what we call the negotiation phase and the final contractual documents preparation. At that point, we might come back and ask you more questions to clarify certain things in your proposal. We're also going to give you some examples and help you prepare the final documents for the contract, which are the statement of project objectives, the budgets, any supporting documents and letters that we need to provide either to the DOE or to UCLA for the issuing of the contract. And then there is also a time where the DOE will take to review those technical and financial documents. They will make sure that the supports are correct, that your budgets are clear, that you have all the supporting information, There are no things in there that will be against the DOE rules or requirements. And once that gets clarified, we are clear to go to finalize the contract. At that point, UCLA gets involved. They take all the documents that you already prepared. If there's anything else that we need from you, they will ask for those information and we'll guide you through that process. We will be there to help you prepare all those documents. And, with that, the UCLA will go back and forth between your lead organization and UCLA to make sure that the terms and conditions and all the supporting information is accepted. The contract is finalized, it's signed, and then, finally we get to the project execution, which is where the actual fun will start for most of us, which is, just running the project, going through the different steps that you outline on your proposal, and then hopefully, getting the results that we need. Now, one thing that is important to mention here, though, is the different focus areas have also different timing or timelines for the execution. For example, Haresh mentioned the innovation projects will be 6 months durations. The platform capabilities is 9 months, and the workforce development and R&D are 12 months. These are the maximum months that we are allocating for this specific type of projects. You might have projects that would only get to 8 months or 6 months or 5 months. It really depends on what you're trying to tackle and what you're trying to solve. So keep that in mind as well as you develop your proposal, because if we see, for example, a proposal related to the platform capabilities and it's 18-month duration, obviously that's not going to work. So that timing is important for us as well. And then let me just briefly cover this, because this is probably the most important documents that you will need in preparation for your proposals. As you heard from the beginning, we have 4 focus areas. We have developed 4 different templates, one for each area. The template itself, if you look at the different sections, are the same. What's different is really just the examples that were given you that are embedded into these documents. You will see that each of these documents will have a green text in different sections. The green text is the example. You can remove it as you prepare your proposal. Okay, but please make sure you use the right template as you prepare those proposals. If you are planning in responding to multiple focus areas, you will have to use multiple templates. Okay, so for example, if you said, oh, I was planning in the providing a proposal in an innovation project and also an R&D project, that's fine. I mean, the same group, the same team, the same lead organization can supply or submit 2 different proposals in 2 different focus areas. That's perfectly acceptable. But don't mix the different focus areas in the same proposal. That will not be accepted. And then also keep in mind that we need the project quote chart. So every proposal will need this PowerPoint. It's a very good tool for us as we evaluate this proposal. We start with the quote chart to get an idea what your project is about. We look at the different areas that I mentioned. What you're trying to solve, the problem statement, the technical approach, your teams, who's involved, the budget, all of that has to be captured in this specific template, and submit that as a separate document. We want it in PowerPoint mode format, and that's because it helps us with the evaluation. So I hope this gives you a good idea of what the expectations are as we move forward and as you prepare your proposals. Obviously, if you have any questions, we're always open. We'll give you plenty of time today to answer some of your questions. But at the same time, if you have any questions later on, you can always send those questions until the final day of the final submission due date of the proposals. The answers will be posted for everyone to see who's asking what. So everybody has the same information, and we'll share that with the whole team. So with that, I know I've gone through it very quick, but you will have copies of these slides If you've run into anything in here that you don't understand or you want more clarity, please let us know and we'll be happy to answer those questions. So with that, Harish, back to you.
Thank you, Miguel. That was certainly a lot of information to cover.
Yeah.
The last segment here for today's talk is the cost share tutorial, and we have Howard Goldberg with us. So Howard, floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Arash. Glad to be here. Good morning, everyone. So since CESMII is a public-private institute, we have this unique financial term called cost share, and the next slide describes that. So CESMII is funded by the federal government. We're funded by the Department of Energy. So when we fund the project teams with the government's money, for every dollar that the government provides the project teams, the government wants to leverage that dollar. So they want to see the project team co-invest another dollar. So that co-investment doesn't need to be cash by the project team. It could be an in-kind contribution or a donation. So that way the government leverages dollars. So every dollar of funding we give a project team, in general, we'd like to see $1 of cost share or co-investment come back. So towards the bottom, there's examples of cost share. So a cost share can be personnel costs that the project team is contributing to a project that they're not expecting financial reimbursement for, or it could be raw materials or supplies they're contributing to a project without getting financial reimbursement, or any third-party software or hardware, or value of another service. And maybe there is a consulting service a project team brings in and they're not going to charge the project for. The last example there is a very specific case, and for any project teams that think they'll use this, please talk to CESMII first, because the rules around this are very specific. But in general, if a project team is taking down a live production line to run simulated production or non-sellable product to do the CESMII project, in certain cases, we can develop a facility usage fee that can count towards cost share. So again, please speak to us ahead of time, but in general, that is allowable. Also, R&D facilities can count their standard usage fees for using their R&D facilities if needed for the project as cost share as well. Cost share contributions cannot include any construction costs. Our award does not allow construction costs. So that's building new buildings or additions to existing or modifications to existing buildings for a project, not allowed for cost share. So the next slide tries to give a hypothetical example. So this is a standard innovation project where it's $200,000 of total cost, $100,000 of Fed share or FS, which is the federal dollars that CESMII funds the project team, the real green dollars. The $100,000 of CS or cost share is a co-investment or in-kind contribution from the project team. So this project team is comprised of an application vendor, a manufacturer, and a system integrator. So the system integrator in the table on the bottom looks out here. They get all the green dollars, the real cash. They don't contribute any cost share. Their team members are contributing the cost share for the project of $100,000. So the app vendor is contributing $45,000 of cost share, and the manufacturer is contributing $55,000 of cost share. So as you go back to the top, the application vendor's $45,000 of cost share is composed of these elements. They are contributing their own proprietary software license, but due to government regulations, your proprietary software does not count towards cost share. You can contribute to the project can use it, but we cannot dollarize it or count it towards cost share due to government regulations. But in this case, the application vendor is also purchasing third-party cloud storage support and third-party software licenses. Those third-party purchases that they're not going to charge the project for do count towards cost share in that case. Now, the manufacturer is donating $35,000 of engineering labor as cost share, so they're contributing labor to the project they're not going to get reimbursed for. They are taking down a live packaging line to run simulated production, and based on a facility usage fee, it equates to $15,000. And also they're pulling from inventory $5,000 of packaging supplies that they're not going to charge the project for. So these are just hypothetical examples of cost share. So the next slide, we show some of the cost accounting for the application vendor. I'm sorry, the manufacturer. Sorry, you can go back to the next slide. My mistake, the slides are in a different order. So the manufacturer is contributing $35,000 of engineering labor. So they're contributing 2 engineers, Joe Engineer and Jane Engineer, at $80 an hour, a straight salary cost for roughly $117. So those total engineering dollars of straight salary costs are just under $19,000. But CESMII and the government allows a fringe markup. This is a markup to account for the benefits, the overhead of employees. So they've negotiated with CESMII a 25% markup. Each company calculates their own markup based on their financial statements. And there's some slides in the back later for reference that tell you how you can calculate that. But in this case, for the hypothetical example, the manufacturer has a 25% fringe rate. So it allows them to add just under 5K of fringe markup. Additionally, they can also add an overhead rate or an indirect rate of 50%. Again, this is calculated based on the slide in the back that shows the methodology. So their $19,000 of labor, straight labor costs, they can account for $35,000 of cost share when you factor in the fringe benefit and the overhead markup. So what was an $80 an hour straight labor costs with all the fringe and overhead markup turns into a $150 an hour burdened labor rate that counts towards cost share. So that's just a simple example here on labor cost share. The next slide is the application vendor. So they're purchasing cloud storage for the project, roughly $17,000, and 2 licenses of software from an outside vendor, roughly for a total of $13,000. So their total out-of-pocket straight purchasing costs are $30,000. They've also negotiated a 50% indirect or overhead markup with CESMII. So they can add $15,000 of overhead markup to process the orders. So what is a $30,000 out-of-pocket purchase can count as, what they can count towards cost share is $45,000. So that this shows the simple cost accounting for cost share. So in government accounting, you can capture fringe and overhead markup. You cannot capture any profit in government funded institutes like CESMII. So then the next slide, won't get into the detail here. These slides will be here for reference, but there's 3 options to calculate your fringe rates, and there's a hyperlink to a guidance document. It's a very good document. It kind of steps you through it step by step. There's several options there. Please take a look at that document first. If you still have questions, we're happy to answer them, or we can get on the phone and help you work through calculating your fringe rate. Somewhere in the next slide, that same document can also be used to calculate your indirect rate. So the document steps you through examples. And there's also other options here to come up with your indirect rate as well. So again, first off, please take a look at that guidance document hyperlink. And any questions, we'd be happy to get on the phone with our fund manager to help work you through the financial cost accounting. So that's cost share and the indirect and fringe rates. So the kind of the accounting side of doing project work at CESMII. So with that, it's back to you, Haresh.
Thank you, Howard. Well, this brings us to the Q&A session. I think we have roughly 20 minutes to answer any of your questions. We will go to the Q&A chat and see what we've come up with. Roy, if you can coordinate that for us, appreciate it.
I can do that, Haresh. Thank you. So we have a number of questions that have been answered in the chat. We will cover some of them as well. The first question, is there a way for CESMII to support small and medium manufacturers that are typically not technically advanced?
Well, I think the short answer is yes, to use a phrase that my boss uses all the time. The short answer is yes. I think we are encouraging every manufacturer to apply. And if you have specific questions, I think one of the things that you can do is when you, the beauty about some of the SM innovation projects is that you can actually partner with other people, other institutions that may have the technical expertise to help you. So one instance may be that if you're a small manufacturer who doesn't have a technical talent to, say, evaluate or work with, say, predictive models, you could approach either a software vendor or a academic member to put together that team and do the project. So, and I'll let, if John is on the call, John Dyke, maybe you can add some flavor to that. like. Okay.
Good. Second question. Does the application vendor need to be based in the USA?
I could take that one, Arash, if you want.
Thank you.
Sure. So all the project team members, the named project team members, need to be based in the US, and all the project work needs to be based in the US. So that's the general rule. We do allow US divisions of foreign entities. So like if Toyota Motors had a US division that want to participate in the project, there is a process with the DOE to allow that, but we do allow US divisions of foreign entities to participate. You can purchase as general supplies and materials from foreign vendors, but vendors are not formal project team members. So if you're a formal project team member as subrecipient, you have to be based in the US.
Thank you, Howard.
Sure.
There was a follow-on question with regard to small and medium manufacturers not being technically advanced. It's how do we go about that? Are there members who can be accessible? And I believe the answer there is we have a combination of members with system integrators and other companies that would be happy to work with you. And we often provide the service of marrying folks together to solve problems.
And in addition to that, Roy, as you well know, we also have a small to mid-sized manufacturer affinity groups. So it brings SMMs together for helping them discuss problems in their industry in general, but also allows them to a venue to team up for projects and answer questions. So that's just one of many different avenues, just to add on to what you say of how we help SMMs.
Thank you, Howard. This one's probably for you as well. Do we provide technical assistance or subsidies for helping applicants prepare proposals?
Due to DOE regulations, you cannot be financially reimbursed for preparing a proposal, but we can pull in the appropriate DOE support, can help answer any questions and guide you in your proposal writing, but there is no financial subsidization for your proposal writing. It's just not allowed by government regulations. If that's the question.
I think so. Thank you. One of our participants asks, says they're a nonprofit software development consortium serving under-resourced students. How can we connect with SMMs in your network? Do you provide introductions?
The most easiest is joining CESMII and joining the SMM affinity group. We do allow some guest membership if you want to kind of guest in and test out CESMII before you join. Or we can have Dale Turner, who oversees our SMMs and SMICs, to reach out to them and talk to them as well. So whatever avenue they prefer, we're happy to engage.
Thank you, Howard. I'm pleased to see someone's reading our website and they asked a question about something we have posted. We encourage proposals that combine focus area 1 with either focus area 3 or focus area 4 in collaboration with solution providers and system integrators. And the question is, can you explain that in a little more detail?
Yeah, sure. So I'll take that one. There may be cases where, for example, you have expertise on a particular piece of equipment and you are really charged up to create a SM profile, and this is in focus area 3, right? But that particular asset is also used in a exemplar manufacturing use case that you're trying to solve in focus area 1, right? So you could leverage that either as your team itself, so your team could have 2 proposals, or you could work with another team that is doing one of the other proposals and say, hey, this ties very well into what you're trying to do. It would strengthen both proposals, right? So that's the type of encouragement we are looking for.
Yeah. And if I may, Horace, let me add something a little bit more here. So if you have that specific example, but you have, tackling 2 different areas of interest of focus areas, the issue would be if you put it in the same proposal, then it becomes one or the other for us. So if you separate them, it's a lot easier. You might want to have a reference and say, this proposal is also going to serve this other proposal in obtaining whatever the solution that you're trying to solve or the problem that you're trying to solve. Because otherwise, if you put them in the same proposal, then we get to the point where we said, let's say, for example, you are creating a profile and we said, we like the profile that you're creating, but maybe the other half of is not as strong as some of the other proposals. So it becomes a problem on how do we separate those? So if you have any questions as you prepare those, and if you run into those issues, please let us know and we can help you come up with the right solution here. So
Thank you. The next question's for Jonathan Wise. There are two questions which he's answered in the chat, but it'd be worth going into a little more detail on each of them. The first is how we handle support. Is it exclusively through emails? Do we have other mechanisms? And the second question is about our SM Innovation platform. And the question is around the standards that we're supporting in our development of that platform.
Yeah, just to give a flavor for developer support, CESMII does not have an engineering team per se. There are 3 of us on the tech team, so we will do our best to provide support to project teams. We have a Discord channel set up where there is a community of other project teams where we're all evolving this technology together. So that's kind of the best channel is to join the other developers, including us working on it. If we can't solve it there, we're happy to hop on a Zoom session and try and solve a problem together. Like I said, our running platform is made up of commercial software, and the CESMII members that have contributed that software will kind of provide the next level of support. We have a mechanism to file bugs with them, and if we're really stuck, we'll pull in the developers themselves. But it is this is not a commercial offering. This is a research and development effort that we're doing together as a community. So the channel is the community supports each other. Related to standards, the answer that I typed in is probably the most detailed, and it's probably easier to skim than to just read it back out loud. But we're primarily using OPC UA for the information model definition. And then we're supporting a variety of OPC interfaces, as well as interfaces from both proprietary and other standards. And then for the application layer, actually getting access to the data, we found no good experience. So we built an API based on a standard called GraphQL that we are proposing to become a standard to a variety of the groups that we work with. For the actual ontology, or maybe more specifically the semantics, how do we know what a word means? There's kind of 2 competing ones that one is backed by our friends in Europe and one is more commonly used here. And we're kind of waiting to see how the dust settles on that one. So we haven't chosen a standard there.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. There's one last question, and that's for me. The question is, will this presentation be posted on the website? The answer is yes. We should have it up there likely by tomorrow morning, along with a recording that you've just seen. So you feel free to share that with others. Any other questions? We'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, there's a link to the Q&A page that'll be made available, obviously, and you're welcome to post your questions there. The caveat is that because this is a public RFP, that all your questions and answers have to be posted so that everybody else can see it as well. We cannot be responding to just specific entities in that. So,
Haresh, another question was posted. Do we need to be a current CESMII member to participate in the RFP response? How do we join the Discord channel? How do we identify a potential partner?
Okay, we'll take that in three pieces. I think the last two questions around the Discord channel is something that Jonathan is managing. Just send us a note and we will make that available to you. Howard has answered the question around the connecting with different members. Either contact us or become part of CESMII as an observer or guest, and then also look at our affinity groups that can help you do that. And the first question, remind me again, I'm sorry.
It's about participating in the RFP. Do you need to be a member? The answer there is you don't need to be a member to submit a proposal. However, you do need to be a member once the proposal has been accepted.
That is correct.
And that's the end of the questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Roy, for coordinating the Q&A. Appreciate it. And like we've said before, the presentation, the recording will be available to you. You'll have the Q&A website up and running. And we are looking forward to some great proposals from all of you. And if you know of others who might be interested in this, please feel free to forward this information to them. Appreciate it. Thank you to the CESMII team for making this happen today, and thank you all for joining us. Have a good, safe rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.